Okay, good morning. We're starting Siman Reish Nun Beis today. This is a very interesting Siman. It will take a few days. What we're going to discuss today is setting melachas in motion before Shabbos that are sort of activated and engaged over Shabbos. Did I say Yom Tov or Shabbos? So setting something in place before Shabbos where it's going to sort of kick in over Shabbos. And it has applications for time switches. Can you own a vending machine? Which is going to be operated on Shabbos, this sort of thing. It's an interesting area. So it says the Mechaber, Sif Aleph, Mutar lahaschil b'melacha b'erev Shabbos. You're allowed to begin a melacha on erev Shabbos, samach lechashecha, close to Shabbos. Af al pi she'eni yochel legamra miba'id yom. Even though you're not going to finish off this activity miba'id yom whilst it's still daylight. And this activity, this melacha will be completed over Shabbos. Kagain, for example, lishros diyoi for samamonim b'mayim. If you want to soak some material in dye, in water and dye over Shabbos, for him nishrim kol Shabbos. So you put it in the dye before Shabbos, but actually it's sort of wallowing in the water, in the liquid over Shabbos. Veloses unin pirish agudos, bundles shall pishin of flax letanur into an oven kadesh slavim. So you put it into the oven before Shabbos, and it's going to continue the operation over Shabbos. Veloses semer letechayera, or to put wool into a large pot she'ena aloesh, which is not on the fire. V'hi tucha batit, and it's surrounded, it's covered by cement. She'emchal aloesh, because if it was on the fire, also shem yechatze, we're worried you're going to stoke it. Perishigale v'yoag gecholim b'machto, you'll stoke the coals. V'afilu ein aloesh, and even if it's not on the fire, im eina tucha batit, if it's not sort of sealed with cement, also shem yagis bo bekaf, you might stir it with a spoon. V'hamegis b'kadera, afilu ein aloesh, and stirring it with a spoon, even if it's not on the eish chayiv mishum mevashel, that is accelerating the cooking process, and therefore it's a problem of mevashel. Umutza lifres mitzudos, and similar, another example of doing an activity before Shabbos, which will sort of involve a malacha on Shabbos, is being peiris mitzudos. If you put out a trap, a net or something before Shabbos, chayav oifas of different animals, the dogim behem nitzoidim b'Shabbos, and then it's the animals will be trapped on Shabbos itself. Umutza. So again, the starting point of the Mechaber is mutar lahaschil b'melacha b'erev Shabbos, even though it's going to be completed on Shabbos. So he's giving lots of examples of that. So you're allowed to do all these things. Umutar, continues the Mechaber, limkar le'eni Yehudi lahatino samach lechashecha. You can sell, let's say, an animal to a non-Jewish person very close to Shabbos. So long as he walks out of your home, and you're sort of piling up the animal and you're giving it to the animal, so long as he leaves your home before Shabbos, then you're okay. Some say that he can actually walk out of your front door on Shabbos. If the Jew was miyached a mokum for the non-Jew, that also is allowed. But one should be machmir to avoid that possibility. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Lishros diyo. So you're allowed to soak begodim in liquid, in dye, if you put it there before Shabbos. Of a Shabbos also. So why can't you do it on Shabbos? What's the problem of putting material into dye on Shabbos? Mishum megabel. You're making a dough or some sort of a thicker material. You're mixing the dye with the water, so that's a problem possibly of givul. The other problem, of course, is soveya. Since you began the process before Shabbos, and it continues on Shabbos Shari. If you look at number 2, so this is the theme of this seif, of beginning a process before Shabbos that is going to continue on Shabbos. Kagain hashvisas Shabbos b'shem hamincha. Sorry, kosav hashvisas Shabbos b'shem minchas Chaim. She'also lasos kain. Of b'shem hagon b'sviv hezach frank shemuta. So you got a machlokas of relatively contemporary poskim whether you're allowed to do something before Shabbos that is going to activate a melacha on Shabbos. And we'll see examples in a minute. Now, this is quite a famous Igros Moshe. Of V'shal Shuvas Igros Moshe, in Orach Chaim Chelik Dalet Siman Samach, he's stopping in Mutzel Lekav in Shabbos Kadesh Task Leoshes Yadei Melacha b'Shabbos. Are you allowed to activate a time switch before Shabbos so that it engages on Shabbos? She'ulai v'hitze Shulchan Aruch ela haschem melacha be'erev Shabbos Kadesh Yizikon Shabbos. Maybe you're only allowed to start something before Shabbos, where you're doing something before Shabbos, Kadesh Yizikon Shabbos, Ach she'taschem la melacha b'Shabbos. But to actually begin the melacha on Shabbos, maybe not. Lo hit it, right? So if I'm putting my material in the dye on Erev Shabbos, and I've begun the process, I've done my melacha Erev Shabbos, and it's continuing over Shabbos, maybe that's what's allowed in this sif. But to actually just press the time switch, where the melacha only kicks in Shabbos morning, or Friday night, or on Shabbos itself, maybe not. So Moshe famously says that when it involves zilzul Shabbos, all of a sudden the lights go on, or the dishwasher starts kicking in on Shabbos because you've preset it. That's a zilzul Shabbos. But often zenitin. Now this goes on to the next page, the bottom half. Last is kol hamelacha so Shabbos. Ve'en lechol zilzul b'kavod Shabbos godel mizeh. Ubara. Now this is important. Ubara she'im hoya hashon Shabbos. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is a famous line. He said if time switch would have been around in the times of the Tanoim and the Amoraim, they would have forbade use of a time switch on Shabbos. In the same way that there's an issa of Amir Lenochri, they would have forbade the use of a time switch, says Ramosha. It would have included in that. However, when it comes to turning the lights on and off using a time switch, Kos of Sham, Moshe himself writes that since it's become very common, when you're walking home on Friday night from a Shalom Zacha late on a Friday night, and suddenly you see the lights go off at the Goldberg's house at midnight on a Friday night, you're not chayshish that anything happened. You realize the time switch has gone off. It's very widespread. Okay, me'idach b'shal Shuvah Shevet HaLevi Kosov shebe'erev Shabbos mutar lechav v'shon Shabbos afilu b'zeh mechaber madlik. Vosner is more makel, and he says that setting a time switch before Shabbos to activate something, to extinguish or to lights on Shabbos is no problem. V'roa mashik osavna lekamon, or mashik osavna lekamon, etc. Okay, we're talking about that. Now, just the last paragraph. The dafka b'dovsha kol yodim shu melacha. This is only for something where everyone knows there's a melacha. And people won't come to mistakenly do this on Shabbos. No one's going to come to switch on the lights on Shabbos. They know that's not allowed. For example, to put water under an oil lamp to capture the sparks of flames or whatever. So to put a little bowl of water to catch the sparks that come out before Shabbos, then even though that's okay, you're doing it before Shabbos, since people don't realize that you can't do that on Shabbos itself, then even before Shabbos one should avoid it. Okay, that's an important footnote. Now let's go back to the Mishnah Berurah. Sif cotton base shall pishtan letano. So another example of doing or beginning a process before Shabbos is putting pishtan, is putting bundles of flax into the oven to whiten on Shabbos. So even if the oven, when you put it in there erev Shabbos, even if the oven is not sealed, in this situation we're not worried you're going to stoke the coals. We're not cautious that you're going to open the oven during the process because that's damaging to the flax. Or putting wool in a big pot so that it will absorb the dye. Also, because we're worried you might play around with it so that it absorbs well. Sif cotton hay. Because if it's not tuach batit, then shemi yogis babakaf. You might come to stir it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, hine after mechabe hishva hagosa b'yer lagosa b'kadeira. We compare the two, hagosa stirring a pot and stoking the coals, Eina Shovel Gamre, the Bekader Im Humaver is called Sorchus Les Beisura. When it comes to food, once it's cooked, it's cooked. For also but a yaira, the more you stir, the more it's going to absorb the dye. And therefore, putting wool into a pot before Shabbos, if it's not tuach batid, if it's not a sealed pot, it's also. Even if there is time before Shabbos for it to absorb properly, we're worried that even after Shabbos comes in, you might come to stir it. So we said, what is this going on? If you're stirring a pot on Shabbos, you've got an issue of bishul. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkot and Vav, you're accelerating the cooking process. Okay, another example the Mechaber gives is if you put out a trap before Shabbos, so then it just activates on Shabbos itself, that also would be mutter. Says the Mishnah Berurah over Shabbos, imhu oisakain, if you were to put the trap out on Shabbos, there the issue is, of course, one of the melachas, it's seder, is trapping the animal. So then we also said, the Mechaber said, that you're allowed to sell an animal to a non-Jew and to load it up, and so long as it leaves your house before Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkot and Ches, Ubilvad sheyetze, Rotzolema, the ein shehus lezeh, oishe ein Yehudi masne imo sheyikach min b'Shabbos, af hamechira also, then that would be problematic. Now, this comes on to a very interesting area in halacha. What if you've got a vending machine? I got a friend a friend of a friend who's got in the vending machine business, so he can be schluffing in his bed at 3:00 on a Shabbos Friday night, and he's got vending machines in educational establishments throughout the United Kingdom. So there could be a university in Aberdeen in Scotland, and they're coming back from some party on Friday night, and he wants a Diet Coke, and he puts £1 into the machine, and this fellow who's sleeping in his bed on Friday night is getting 10p from every pound or whatever it is. So is that allowed on Shabbos? So it says number 6, for this is the top of the page, for if you've got a vending machine, we're not talking about in Bnei Brak, we're talking about in a city where the majority of people are not Jewish, no problem. And you should first of all have in mind not to be zeicher the money, mezakah the money until liskos, the money until Motzei Shabbos. Fine. So you have in mind that whoever is going to buy a drink from one of my machines on Erev Shabbos, you say to yourself, I have in mind that the transaction is sort of the transfer of ownership is taking place before Shabbos. So even though we don't always apply breira, but for an Issa Drabonon, over here we can apply breira. Retroactively, the guy who bought my Diet Coke, the transfer took place before Shabbos. So, so you're allowed to use a vending machine if you're allowed to own a vending machine which operates on Shabbos, so long as it's in a city where the majority of people are not Jewish. Okay, let's just.
Person's keeping Shabbos, and you're in London, he's in Glasgow,
right?
And in that hour between Shabbos going out in London and Glasgow, you buy it. Is that okay? Does that make a difference?
Well, if you know it's a Jewish guy.
Yeah.
I see. It's like sending a fax or an email or whatever before Shabbos to America, or sorry, to Eretz Yisrael or Motzei Shabbos to America. So again, what was your example? That you've got a vending machine and you've got a Jewish guy. How do you? What's the Matthias there? Is it a Rove city of? Is a city of Rove Yidden? If it's a city,
he lives in Scotland.
Yeah, but if the city is not Rove Yidden, then there's no problem anyway. You can even do it on Shabbos. You're not chayshish.
If it's in the middle of Golders.
So if it's in Golders Green, and I'm where?
He's in America.
In America. So I suppose that's a good question. Not sure. In other words, I'm in America and he's in Golders Green, and for me it's not Shabbos, and for him it is Shabbos. Or the other way around, you're saying?
Yeah. It's
if it's Shabbos for me, the owner, and it's not Shabbos for him, I see. I'm not entirely sure. Mistama, it's not a chil Shabbos because I see. For me, I'm acquiring it. Yeah, I'm not sure. Good question. Okay, Tess. Let's just finish off the Mishnah Berurah. So I've got to make sure the animal leaves my house before Shabbos. So people don't think that they won't look like I'm sort of commanding him to take the animal out on Shabbos. And another reason is, it's not a Marasayan problem, that people don't think that this will happen on Shabbos. Even though there's no Hitzah issues, then there will still be a problem. וכן in schiras איזה חפץ ודאי יש להחמיר אפילו במקפס חמר ואין יודי די שם שיוצאים מבייס ובייג'ם. So it's just very important that the animal leaves your house before Shabbos. Okay, then there is those who are matzir if you're miyached a mokum to the Ein Yehudi before Shabbos, and therefore you can even take it out on Shabbos. Why? Svarosam to have a kilu kvar munach bebeisish and Yehudi, because it's as if it's in a non-Jewish person's house already, and therefore it's not a problem. However, v'yesh lahachmis says the Mishabur Yud Aleph, kadei shelo lahargal ein Yehudi bekach, that we shouldn't become accustomed to these sort of arrangements. It's not a good idea. V'ayim b'achreinim sheskimu the medina ein lahakal bazeh, you shouldn't be makel to kam lam b'simin tof mem gam gabe chometz to lo mahani biyiched lo makom. Designating a place does not help in terms of chometz on Pesach. Not only can a person, but because a person could, the observer could see that you actually can think that the Yisrael commanded him to do this on Shabbos. And that's their extenuating situations. If the Ein Yehudi is a strong, powerful person, because there's Ava and there's going to be the damaging situations for Jewish people. If you rented out the room to a non-Jewish person, even for a small amount, for the duration of Shabbos, even if you rent out the entire room, you're not just miyachid the place, but you rent out the room, the Mogen Avram and other Achronim say that you should not be makel in that situation. Okay.